Hello everyone, my name is Leonardo Escalante and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about social capital, a very important concept, and I'm also going to tell you a little bit about how you can map your own social capital. So I'm going to go over 4 sections. Number 1, what is social capital? 2, why is it important to build social capital? Then how can we build social capital? And last but not least, I'm going to show you how to map your social capital. So let's go ahead and get started. So what exactly is social capital? Now this is a term that has recently regained popularity as organizations around the world look at the power and benefits of social relationships. Now the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, defines it as networks together with shared norms, values, and understandings that facilitate cooperation within or among other groups. Another way you can look at it is to think of relationships in your community that help us work together and share resources to address opportunities and issues in our community. We all already have a certain level of social capital, but sometimes we are just not aware of it. Now there are 2 types of social capital. First we have bonding social capital, and then we have bridging social capital. Bonding social capital refers to those strong relationships you already have with other people, organizations, or other groups. It holds groups together, and it is most often found in groups that interact frequently. For example, community groups you might be part of already, groups in which you may be a volunteer, support groups, etc. Now, bridging social capital refers to connections or bridges with diverse individuals and groups that would make it possible for everyone to work together. So think of bridging social capital as maybe those relationships that are not as strong as the ones that you have under bonding social capital, but nonetheless relationships that could help you, that could be of great help for so that you can achieve the goal of your project. It's important to build both kinds of social capital, but depending on what you want to achieve, you might have to focus more on one than the other. For example, bonding social capital could help us with smaller scale projects in our community, while bridging social capital might be needed for larger, more complex projects. There is really no clear formula that tells us when you should use one or the other. It all depends really on what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so yeah, social capital sounds cool, sounds trendy, I like it, I'm in, but why is it important? And what's the benefit of building and strengthening our social capital? Now, social capital has many benefits and advantages. For example, it helps us build a stronger community. A community that has the social, political, environmental, and economic conditions to help us achieve our goals. A community that moves together and works together for its betterment. It also makes our community more resilient. It creates a strong network of support that makes facing obstacles and challenges a way easier task. For example, and this might not be the best example, but just bear with me on this one. Let's say that you have an ant that's trying to lift this, what looks to be like a pretty good sized pile of rocks. Now, what would be the likelihood that this single ant would be able to lift this pile of rocks? And what would be the result of that? The result and the likelihood that this ant is going to be able to do it is not very high, and the result is not very promising, and most likely a sad end to this, this ant's life story. But on the other hand, if you have a group of ants working together, coordinated, that are trying to achieve the same objective, which is to lift this pile of rocks, then not only do they have a high likelihood of succeeding, but when they do, they're going to be throwing an ant party. And here we have our ant friends just having a great time. So as I mentioned, this is not the best example, but you get the point. So the lesson is that challenges and opportunities are easier to face when we have the support of others, as we cannot do it alone. By working with others, supporting others, we increase our likelihood of success towards the betterment of our community. So how do you start building social capital? What are some of the steps that you can take? What are some of the strategies? Now, the first one and the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that building social capital involves understanding that everyone has value. Everyone has something to contribute. We all have strengths and talents, and if we combine those with others, it creates a strong social network that allows us to better serve our community. Building social capital is something that you already do on an everyday basis. It's those relationships you form with others, those relationships that are based on trust, reciprocity, and durability. relationships that allow us to create more connections with fellow human beings, that allow us to create a collective vision for the future, to share memories and experiences with friends and family that ultimately make our lives more enjoyable, meaningful, and fulfilling. But you can also start the path towards building social capital by identifying an opportunity or an issue in your community that you would like to address or tackle. I know that oftentimes we think that some opportunities or issues in our community are just impossible to achieve or overcome. And that's when social capital comes into play. Yes, individually, it might be indeed a very difficult challenge to overcome, and it would require a lot of time and effort on our part, just like we saw with our ant friends. But as a group, there is hardly anything that we cannot accomplish. And if you think that your fellow community members are too busy with their lives to be able to lend a helping hand, you would most likely be surprised at how motivated other people are to help when it comes to the betterment of their community. So if there's a problem or an issue or an opportunity that you would like to tackle, start thinking of those relationships you have and those that you would need to form or strengthen and that could help you in your mission. And that's when we get to the last topic, mapping your social capital. So mapping your social capital is something that will make it easier for you to identify the strengths and resources within your community that can be mobilized to work on projects that will contribute to its betterment. Once you start to be more aware of the resources and strengths within your community, it'll be easier for you to put them together and connect them strategically to help achieve a certain goal. So how can you do this? All you have to do is follow these 5 simple steps. Number 1, list the relevant groups, individuals, or organizations that could help you achieve your goal. 2, determine the strength of your ties with those individuals or organizations. How strong is your connection to them? 3, determine the resources that each of those individuals or organizations they have and the resources that could help you in your mission. 4, analyze your map. Once you have filled out all this information, you're going to have to ask yourself some questions that would help you figure out what steps you need to take first, maybe what connections you need to make, or what connections you need to strengthen. And the last step, once you have all the information you need, it's a matter of coming up with an action plan. Now let's talk about each step a little bit more in depth. So the first step, as I mentioned, is to create a list or a table of the relevant group or the individuals or organizations in your community you would like to tap into for a certain project. If you are new to a community, or you don't know that many organizations, individuals, you can start by asking maybe other friends. Maybe you can start by asking a neighbor or a family member that knows someone in that community. If you are completely new to a community and you don't know a lot of people yet, you could also start by visiting the local tourism office or doing a bit of research about any neighborhood meetings you could attend. So in the first column, you're going to add all of those resources. Now, the second step is once you have added all those resources in this first column, and once you have a good list of those groups, individuals, organizations you think should be involved in your project, you're going to have to figure out the strength of your connection to them, the strength of your tie to them. And you're going to write an S for a strong tie and a W for a weak tie. Now, strong ties are those that have a higher level of trust, reciprocity, and durability. And weak ties are those that are a little lower on the level of reciprocity and durability and trust. So once you have added all your organizations in the first column, and then you have figured out the strength of your ties with those organizations in the second column, it's time for us to figure out the resources. Now you'll need to add the resources that each organization, group, or individual have that could help you in your mission. Remember that everyone has a talent, everyone has a skill. So think of all the things that could help you make sure that your project is on the right track. Resources could be financial resources, they could be knowledge of the community, they could be information that someone has about other similar projects. Resources could also include volunteers that could help you. It could also mean that you connect with a person that can help you connect with other groups or other networks. And sometimes also it can mean physical space. Sometimes you need a space to hold meetings or host events. And these are just some examples, but there are many others. And as I mentioned earlier, it all depends on really what you're trying to accomplish. So start adding the resources you can think of, in the third column. And once you have done this, you'll have mapped your social capital. But you still need to figure out what to do with this information and how it will guide your plan. And that's when we come to the step number 4. Now, in order for you to analyze your map, you can do that by just answering these questions. These questions will help you figure out what's the action plan that you'll have to follow. So what resources do your strong ties give you access to? What resources do your weak ties give you access to? Are there any ties you want to strengthen, any connections you want to strengthen? If so, how will you strengthen them? Are there any relevant groups with which you lack social capital that maybe you don't know, that maybe you don't have a connection with? And how can you leverage your ties to have more access to more groups, organizations, and resources? Remember, at the end of the day, it's about involving as many people as you can so that you can increase the likelihood of success for your project. So once you have answered these questions, you will have a good amount of information to know where to start and what to focus on. So start thinking of the action items you'll have to take. What comes first? What needs to be prepared or organized? Who needs to be contacted? What needs to be put together? And so on and so on. It will all depend on really, your mission, your objective, the organizations involved, your level of relationship, or the level of connection that you have with them. All of this would help you figure out where can you start and what would be the best course of action. And that is all. You have successfully mapped your social capital and come up with an initial plan to help you reach your objective. And remember that even if you don't have an issue or opportunity in mind you would like to work on, building social capital is something that will always be beneficial. Because by connecting with friends and family, we have a network of support that makes us stronger when it comes to facing challenges, individually and collectively, and it makes our lives more enjoyable. So thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email to lescalante@fcgov.com. Thank you so much and have a great day.